Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Well, our guest today, Miss Bonnie Gray, she wrote a book called Like Jasmine, and it talks about, finding peace with your past. And she shares a lot of her story, and there are some just shocking pieces to her story. So I just thought a good segue conversation that we could have going into this interview would be, Josh, you've shared over the last few years that we've been hosting this together, your pieces of your story. And so I would love to know, just kind of briefly, how has God used your story? I know even you and Lena recently shared pieces of your story to your whole church, but how has God used the vulnerable places of your story to transform lives?
I think he's used it as a connecting point, and specifically to those outside of the community of faith, because so often, you get thrown the title, labeled with the title pastor. They think you've always had it together. Your story is squeaky clean. And when you were able to share, not to celebrate, but just to be able to connect, I know I really felt my call to ministry was solidified by a young man when I was at a lock-in one time, very early in my ministry. We were doing a lock-in and we were doing prayer request at the end of the night. And this little shaggy haired kid came up and he said, "Will you please pray for me? My dad just passed away." And I thought I almost didn't hear him right. I'm like, "You're at a lock-in. Like, what do you mean your dad just passed away?" And I was like, "When did your dad pass away?" He's like, 2 days ago. And I thought, "And you're at a church lock-in?" And he said, "Yeah." And he looked up at me, I asked him how old he was. And he said, "I'm 10. And I realized in that moment, it was almost like I was looking at myself, because I was 10 when I lost my dad. Wow. And I was able to share with that young man, that, and flash forward, he's getting married, invited us to the wedding. The wedding shower, we're still in his life, and he's going into ministry. Wow. And a lot of that, just that story and my brokenness and part of what I went through helped connect, and also to give him hope in a time that he needed it.
That's powerful. That's powerful. I've seen that true in my own life too. I think sometimes we want to put our past behind us and we don't want to go back there. But listen, God never wastes a season, no. Josh. He never wastes a season. And no, I'm not proud of some of my own decision making, but I'm going to tell you something. My God has redeemed every single one of those terrible decisions. He's redeemed it in profound ways. And that's really what this interview is going to be about. So I'm looking forward to it, where I hope you get encouraged about the brokenness in your life and how God wants to use your story to maximize the kingdom. So we're going to take a minute here and just listen to Bonnie Gray's story, and we'll see you on the other side of this interview.
Did you know that because of D6 Heroes, Randall House and D6 Family are able to equip families far and wide in the area of generational discipleship? Due to the financial gifts of both individuals and churches, D6 curriculum has been translated into multiple languages and distributed across the globe, including restricted access countries for use in the underground church. In short, because of the financial gifts of individuals like you, moms and dads all over the world can pass their faith to the next generation of believers. Would you consider becoming a D6 hero? A D6 hero is an individual who invests their financial resources in the ministry of Randall House and D6 Family to ensure that believers can transfer their faith through the church and home. Please visit d6hero.com to join the ranks of our heroes and to explore other areas where your financial investment can have an impact.
Today I am joined by the incredibly talented Bonnie Gray. Bonnie is the author of Whispers of Rest and Finding Spiritual Whitespace. She's an inspirational writer and speaker whose work has appeared in many outlets. She lives in California with her husband and 2 sons, and her latest book is called Sweet Like Jasmine, Finding Identity in a Culture of Loneliness. Bonnie, it's so great to have you on the show today.
I am so thrilled, to come here and to talk with you, David, about things that we all think about, but find it difficult to express. And so I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, and I want to jump right into your book. Sweet Like Jasmine is a memoir, and it recounts your journey to make peace with your past. And in the book, you really write about some heartbreaking things, kind of some shocking things, just eye-opening things. Why did you want to write this book and put this out there for the public?
Well, I think that all of us carry so many stories about how God has led us through some hard times, but we kind of keep it hidden. We don't want to be judged, and we don't want to, feel like we're different from everyone. So we kind of want to just talk about the things everybody else wants to talk about. But God's power, his message of hope, is in the real stories and experiences that happen to us.
One of the themes that really stands out is the theme of loneliness. It's very prominent in your book. In your life, when did you first feel that loneliness start to creep in?
Well, I was born in San Francisco, Chinatown. My mother was a mail order bride, and my father was a busboy in a noodle shop. So right away, when my life began, and each of us have that, when we feel like we're thrown into a story we didn't choose for ourselves, those moments were when I felt most alone because I couldn't share what my life was like. My father left when I was 7, so I came from a divorced family. And divorce is just something that's very traumatic, and yet it's not something you go to school talking about or even go to church talking about. So those are 2 moments where I first felt alone. One is I felt so different from everyone. And second, there was something traumatic that happened in my family that I couldn't talk about.
In the book, you talk about carrying those invisible wounds from living a dual life. You mentioned that you were Chinese Bonnie at home, but you were American Bonnie at school. Some might argue, well, you had the best of both worlds there. But from reading your book, I get the impression that necessarily wasn't the case. Can you explain why that dual identity is such a struggle for people?
Yeah, I think that many of us relate to how when we're at home, like at home, I was, Chinese Bonnie, the culture that shaped me, the things that were happening in my home. But the moment I stepped out the door when I went to school, or even as I grew older, and I work in Silicon Valley, I was a high-tech professional. I was the first in my family to go to college, first in my family to graduate from high school. So when I stepped into the real world, I kind of hid all those things about me that I felt were different. And so I was then, American Bonnie. And I think everybody relates to that. Who we are at home and then who we are publicly. And so when we are different in different places, we are lonely. We don't have a place where all different parts of us are together.
Now, is there a way that we can help friends who may be dealing with that? Because reading your book, I thought, I have friends that maybe are dealing with this and I have no idea, and they may not want to talk about it. Do you have any wisdom you can offer us on how we can help our friends who may be dealing with that cultural struggle and the back and forth?
I think the first thing I would share is that, well, for instance, for you, David, sharing the things where you feel, those moments you feel the struggle, a tug between who you are as a father, then maybe who you are at work, and maybe who you are as a son or as a husband, like all these different places where we find ourselves split. The more you can share those moments, you're going to give opportunity for other people to share their story. So I would say the wisdom is that even with my children, I'll say to my kids, I said, hey, Josh, he loves to play soccer, right? And I asked him, how come I see yourself holding yourself back when you're playing soccer? Why don't you go up to the ball and meet it? And, when I'm in that mom mode, he might feel like I'm giving him advice He's like, Mom, I got it. You don't need to speak into that. But then I started sharing my story, David. I said to my son, you know what? I know what it's like. You don't want to be that amazing. You're afraid to call attention to yourself. And I shared with him how, as a little girl, I felt that I just wanted to be like everybody else. I didn't want to stand out too much. And I told him that there were times where I'd rather just be small than to try to make an impression. And that caught my son's attention. My son said, okay, he started listening. Tell me more about that, Mom. So that connection with my son happened. And also with my friends, like with my friends, when I asked them, well, how's your week going? Instead of just talking about the things that are going great, I'll talk about the things that are difficult for me this week. And then that opens up space for people to share their stories.
Well, in the book, you chronicle the overwhelming depression and anxiety you experienced, the abuse you endured, dealing with PTSD. You're very open about this, but you also said that for the longest time, you told no one about these things. What kept you from opening up about these issues?
Well, I actually met Jesus early in my life. I was 8 years old when I started going to church, because in the Chinese community, that's kind of where people go for their community, right? They said, hey, there's Chinese people there, and kind of church is where we go for community. Maybe we're looking for something, friendships. And so there was pressure for me to not want to tell them about my struggles, because I was concerned, well, maybe then people would feel I wouldn't have anything to offer in my friendships, right? So I think not wanting to feel like my family is different is what made me hide. I thought that, a lot of times in church, we talk about forgetting your past so that you can head towards God. So I thought that faith meant I need to hide the things that got me down and just keep focusing on encouraging others and, for instance, studying the Bible. And so there was no space for that. And I didn't realize until later, when I had my child, when I became a mom, I started having anxiety. I didn't understand why. I learned that it was because I had hidden all these things about myself, and they were finally now expressing itself in anxiety and depression. One thing I like to tell, a story I like to tell, David, is that I didn't understand why, because I have a loving husband, I have 2 beautiful boys, and I'm no longer in my childhood. So I had asked a therapist, I said, why is this happening now? There's nothing that I'm afraid of. There's no stress in my life, really. And he said, well, Bonnie, did you know that a soldier doesn't experience anxiety and panic attacks when he's fighting, when he's being strong on the battlefield? He's protecting others. When does he start feeling his anxiety and panic attacks? And I said, when he comes home. He said, exactly. When he's safe, that's when he starts experiencing the depression and the anxiety and the fear that he couldn't when he was out on the battlefield. This is really important for our listeners to know, is that when we're experiencing depression or anxiety, it doesn't mean that something is wrong with us right now. In fact, it means you've done good. You've been strong. You've been strong in your faith. Now that you're safe, it's time now to look at the things that had hurt you in the past. So I think this is a myth about anxiety, depression, and mental health that we're afraid to tell others. We're afraid, okay, you think there's something wrong with me. But in fact, it's because you've been strong. You have been faithful. Now it's time for you to heal the parts of you that in the past had been hurting.
And how did your life start to change once you did start opening up to a therapist or your friends or people at your church?
Well, I think it was a change in my, returning to my true identity, because I think I found myself being strong for so many years, kind of the typical, overachiever to, rise above my circumstances, to fit into society, to get my, education, to feel like I have a belonging in the church, things that I can do for other people, things I can do for God. And God was saying, well, wait, Bonnie, I actually love you because of who I created you to be and not just what you can do for me. So my life changed because I had to learn a new language, which was about soul care, which is about rest, which is about what are prioritizing your wellness and your needs. And that's really difficult for those of us that may have, grown up as the encourager, for those who, whether we're fathers or mothers or single people serving God and serving others. We love others. It's hard for us to think, okay, what is it I need to nurture my soul? What is it I need rest? I can't do this. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. Those are things that are hard for us to say as fathers, right? As mothers, people that are typically in leadership or, encouragers. It's hard for us to say, you know what? I feel exhausted. I'm not doing that well. And that's how my life started to change, because once I started saying that, I realized, you know what? I need to move towards the things that give me peace and joy. And then I started becoming real to others and letting other people into my life. So went from loneliness to true belonging. So prior to this, I tried to find belonging in what I could do for others. But now God was showing me the real belonging you crave is found in sharing your life, your stories, who you are, and how you're doing. So it's a very, very big shift in mindset.
That's really good. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue talking to Bonnie.
Are you concerned about your church's future? Will it serve another generation? The Bible says He is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and yet we often only know how to connect to Abraham. Let D6 help you connect with each generation. Your kids and grandkids are counting on you. D6 comes from the principles of Deuteronomy 6 and helps what happens in church also happen at home. Curriculum you can trust. Discipleship that connects.
We are back, and we're talking to Bonnie Gray, author of Sweet Like Jasmine. Now, Bonnie, there's a section in your book where you discuss the necessity of grief. Now, if we're honest, grieving is something that we really don't do well. I think we prefer to ignore it or skip over it, or we try to get through it as fast as possible. As you've been on this journey, what have you learned about the importance of grief?
Well, that's a really important question, because I've always been taught to move past the grief. A lot of times there's this scripture that people like to talk about, which is forgetting what's behind us and to press on forward to Jesus. And I didn't realize until I looked closer, wait, that verse is really not talking about forgetting your past. It's about forgetting the old way of life. Paul was saying, I used to just focus on what I did as a Pharisee, and now God is showing me I need to focus on who I am becoming. So grief is not something I would associate with myself. I'm an enthusiast. I want new experiences. I want to encourage people. So grief is hard, especially when it came to, like I said, things like growing up the oldest in my family, used to taking care of other people, losing my father at a young age. I think that when we don't move into our grief, then we're missing a big part of our story. So I never shared, David, about what it was like to grow up without a father. That's a concrete example where, because I didn't deal with my grief, that's a part of my life that's just kind of like a blank black hole. If you ever knew me before this time, Sweet Like Jasmine, basically I would never talk about what it was like to grow up without a father. But since I started opening up and talking to my friends about it, incorporating in my parenting with my children, and also just with my friends, I have learned so much more about my friends. They started telling me about their grief, what it was like to grow up without a parent, or struggle between two different households, or they're telling me about what life is like for them now in mixed families, right? So suddenly I went from being the Bible teacher where I just talked about the truth to now people sharing their lives with me. My friendships now are so much more real and vulnerable. And I didn't know. It just became a cascade where, okay, sharing my grief actually was connecting. And so the parts of me are now not alone. I mean, another thing that I was single, David, until I was in my 30s. So I never shared with people that I was lonely in my 20s. I didn't want to share that because I didn't want people to start giving me advice about, dating or finding the right one, or you're being too picky, Bonnie. You need to give love a chance. All those different advice. I would hide those feelings I had of loneliness and wanting someone to love me and my struggle as a single person here. Okay. The other thing I hid about myself was I didn't know how to parent. I didn't have a healthy model from my mother. My mother was very verbally abusive. She was very mean. And that was something I hid because I didn't want people to think I didn't respect or honor my mother. So these are two examples where I would hide my grief about not having the mother that I really wanted, right? As a new mom of two boys, I had no idea how to parent. And that was very lonely for me those initial years. But as I opened up and I saw, okay, God said, Paul said that we are letters. We are letters of God, not written on tablets of stone, but on tablets of hearts. I realized, okay, all these areas of grief, whether it's grieving for the mother I never had, or grieving for, as a single person, the grief that I experienced being lonely, those challenges. As I shared those things, I have so many wonderful 20-something friends now, David. I have so many more closer in my relationships with my other friends, whether it's in parenting, so many stories now that we can share with each other. So that's an example where, embracing the grief, even as it happened earlier in my life, God is rewriting, God is redeeming now, even though I have two boys, they're in their teenage years, but it's like so healing for me to be able to talk about those things and also hear other people. And then I'm surprised that I'm able to encourage others through this process. That would have never been my approach.
Yeah. You mentioned the fractured relationship with your mother, and I want to bring up the topic of boundaries because this topic can be so difficult to navigate for people, especially when it involves family. I know you mentioned in the book that's something you especially had to deal with when you started dating and before you got married. What have you learned about setting boundaries?
Well, this was really hard because I grew up in my own Chinese family code. For me, it was, in my Chinese family code, my mother needed to be the matriarch. So, there's a practice in Chinese culture, which was, we need to honor my mother according to her. Again, I want to clarify, it's not all Chinese families. My mom was a very traditional kind of old fashioned. Her needs always needed to be taken care of first. And that was a real big tussle between, the mother-in-law, and then my new life, right? I needed to make that choice. And I learned that forgiveness only takes one person. I can forgive my mother, but reconciliation takes two. So where there was conflict, I had to make this choice. Do I move towards building a new story with my husband, who's not Chinese? What are our values? What's the new family I want to create? And then, can I live with the tension of conflict with my family? So in the past, I would have just hidden all that, David, and I wouldn't tell any of my friends. But because of the way God's, guiding me to open my life, now I realize, okay, my friends may not be Chinese, but they also have struggles, with their family of origin, and how do you balance that with creating your own family life? So it's important to honor God with the new life we've been given with our spouse. And so we often emphasize honor your mother and father, but as a child. But we also need to honor the life God's given us to build new families, new legacy of faith. You look at Abraham and Sarah, they were called away from their family of origin to go on a new journey, to find a better country, so-called. So we are all trying to build a new legacy of faith, and that requires boundaries, especially in cases like mine where there is toxicity, there's negativity. And so we can love our parents, but it doesn't mean we are owned by their decisions. We need to make a new story, create a new narrative with our families.
And one thing I really appreciate about your book, you don't just tie everything nicely together with a little pink bow and happily ever after. This is it. You write from a place of honesty. And I think people will really relate with that because life is messy. Life isn't always perfect. It's not like we always want it. But I love how you basically write about how God has redeemed your situation for his good. And I kind of want to stay there for a second because you talk in the book about finding beauty in brokenness. Now, sometimes we'll tell people, yes, you can find beauty in the brokenness of your situation. And people walk away saying, well, I just feel broken. How are you able to find the beauty in your brokenness?
Well, there's this really beautiful example, when Jesus says, well, God says that he's the potter and we're the clay. Well, in in a beautiful artistic in Asian art. There's pottery. It's kintsugi, and what it is that a broken pottery is actually intentional. They break the pottery, and to put it back together, they use gold. They use gold to highlight the cracks, and that's what makes the pottery being rebuilt beautiful and valuable. So all these different pieces, I've learned that God wants to take their broken pieces, and as we share those broken pieces with each other, we can encourage each other, we can love each other, and we can see God in it. And the most specific way I can think about that, as it relates to this journey, is that we need to be able to open up our stories. We need to share those stories in order to let other people in. There was a time in college that, and I don't know if you wanted for us to go there, David, because I know that you read about this. Okay, well,
go for it.
Yes. So one thing that I have done is I have these babysitters in high school that watch my kids. And as the high school girls kind of watch my kids and go off to college, I kind of keep in touch with them. You know what I mean? So throughout all the years, I have all these different college girls that 20-somethings I keep in touch with. And before they go to college, one thing that nobody ever told me is to be careful about on guard, guarding our bodies, as girls, as women, because I found myself in a situation where I didn't expect it, but in college, I experienced sexual assault. And it was with somebody that I felt like I could trust in Bible study, in Christian circles. I'd known this person for a year. But the point is that that is an example where it was such a broken time for me that I hid, in my 20s. But as I see God redeeming it, healing me throughout the years, I can go back now and I can share this with the girls, for instance, in my life as their babysitters before they go off to college. I say, it may not happen to you, but I want you to know it happened to me. And just being able to share that conversation with them, it gave me an open doorway as I go off to college. It's like this trust that I have and credibility. They're like, okay, I can talk to Bonnie about anything and everything. So that's an example where God turned my brokenness into beauty. Because of that, I have a wonderful, vulnerable relationship with the 20-something friends in my life. And later, as they become in their 30s and get married, it's like this trust is there. So that's an example, David, where God brought beauty out of brokenness. So whatever our listeners, whatever you've gone through, even as parents, like that was really hard for me to tell my sons about. But as I was sharing with them as they were growing up and we were doing, telling them about the birds and the bees, it was in the back of my mind, this whisper. God was saying, share this story with your sons. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that because what will they think of mom? I just was so frozen on that. But that's quiet, gentle whisper said, Bonnie, I loved you through it. You can share this, share my love through that brokenness. And so here I am. My son is 12 years old, and he's just learning about the birds and the bees. And as I shared it with him, I thought, oh no, are they going to kind of just be sitting there in silence? And how will they think of mom? But instead, my son said, Mom, that's terrible you went through that. I'm so sorry. And they hugged me. These are my sons, David. They hugged me. And he said, Mom, thank you for sharing that with me. And they just hugged me. And we just had this really sacred, beautiful moment. And I said, so that's why it's really important, sons. You need to be loving and honor the people in the future. I know you don't have to think about it now. You don't even think about girls, but in the future later, if you are representing God's love to, someone you'll meet in the future. That's another example where God redeemed, brokenness to beauty. So I always share with people, my readers, they often say, Bonnie, I have so many stories, but I want to share, but I just don't know when. I said, you can share it now because God's goodness is in your story.
And I will tell our listeners right now, with this being the D6 podcast and our focus on Deuteronomy 6, if you pick up a copy of Sweet Like Jasmine, you're going to read Bonnie's story of discipleship, and you're going to find out how she was discipled by someone who was older and how she's doing discipleship now. And whether you are married, whether you're single, whether you have kids or don't have kids, she provides such great examples of how it worked in her life and the people that took her under their wing. And it's not as difficult as we make it sometimes. And so I just want to put that plug in there for people that are, out there going, how do I do this? How do I connect with the younger generation and things like that? Check out what happened with her because it's such a beautiful picture. Bonnie, to end this great conversation, Sweet Like Jasmine is your story of finally being seen and known. What lasting word can you leave to readers who feel incredibly lonely and broken and who are tempted to hide parts of themselves that make them feel unworthy?
Yeah, I think I love your segue into what we can do in mentoring others, because you actually can share those broken places and you will be surprised at how many people need to hear what you've been through and what you're going through. And you will be surprised that many of us, because we all walk by faith, have walked through the places of loneliness that you have. Okay. And when there's somebody who doesn't understand, that's okay. They're not there yet in their healing journey, but find someone who you feel is loving and compassionate. You'll read through Sweet Like Jasmine. I only got there because of other people poured into me. They shared their stories of brokenness, and that made me feel loved and accepted. So one, remember, you are loved and accepted by God. He's been through those hard times himself, those lonely times, and he's also going to bring other people into your life. So share your story and you'll find those people to love you the way God loves you.
That is great. Well, Bonnie's book is called Sweet Like Jasmine, and it almost reads like a work of fiction because you will find your jaw just being on the floor at some of the things that happen. Just an incredible story. We've only scratched the surface here. I mean, you'll find out just how a birth certificate completely changed her life. It's a book you need to check out. It really is a beautiful account of how God uses our unique and broken stories to create something so beautiful. Bonnie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dave. It was wonderful to be here with you.
What an incredible interview / counseling session for me. I can be completely honest. There was a couple of things that she said, normalizing being transparent with challenges and your struggles with your kids, like, hey, what great happened today? But just going, hey, what was tough today? Hey, this is where I'm struggling, and not like oversharing with your kids or people, but normalizing that, hey, we don't have to act like it's all good all the time, and my personal, struggle with anxiety was due to some PTSD that I didn't even realize that I had gone through. I didn't realize I knew it was traumatic, but I'd never experienced panic attacks or anything. And, when she talked about soldiers experiencing PTSD after they get home from the battlefield, that it's not in the moment. And like when I was in the moment, I was scared. I had a very traumatic experience with her. My life was almost threatened, and won't get into the story, but like 2 weeks later, I started having these panic attacks and didn't know what was going on. And finally the therapist, I went to therapy for the first time in forever. And he was like, yeah, it's PTSD. And then it was just like, so that's what it was. Okay. And now, I thought it was important to be able to share that, it gives me, like, even on this, normally I wouldn't share that I went through some trauma and I had anxiety and panic attacks. But now I feel like that the stigma of mental health is being removed and it's okay to talk about it. And so I'm thankful Bonnie is open and open for me to do that.
I think there were two things that stood out to me in this interview. The first one, when she started talking about boundaries and working through relationships with her family, she talked about that forgiveness takes one person, but reconciliation takes two.
Yes.
And that was so powerful. It's so powerful. And I need to sit with it longer, to be honest with you. I don't necessarily know that I have complete understanding on what that looks like and what exactly scripture calls each to, speaks to in terms of each individual situation, because I think forgiveness is our part. And I think one of the lies I believe for a long time about forgiveness within harm within my family is that we believe the lie that forgiveness is validation, but forgiveness is not validation. Forgiveness is a process, and it's not an event, it's a process.
Yes.
And you're not validating the hurt. You're saying, God, I trust you with the hurt.
Yes.
And so I think I have to understand that forgiveness is about trusting God with the hurt and not so much validating the hurt. So that's number one. And then number two, the reconciliation piece. I mean, there's an automatic boundary if both people don't want to come to the table to move forward. And so I think you can forgive and be at peace, but sometimes if the other person's not willing to reconcile, there's a boundary there with that person. I just value that she said that. That's very wise and very
healthy
good.
boundaries.
Yes, healthy.
One of the things, she talked of soul care. I just love
Mm-hmm.
that. Makes me feel good, even just saying soul care, because we care about our bodies, what we eat, and go to the gym, some of us, and some of us don't. I'm not going to say which category I may fall into most days, but we have all these things to care for other things, our physical body, but soul care. And she made the point of Jesus loves us for who he created us to be, not for what we can do for him.
That's right.
And that is freeing, because
That
we are
is.
human beings, not human doings,
That's
and
right.
it's hard as leaders sometimes to admit when we're tired and when we're not doing well. But I love, trying to normalize that some, at least for a pastor, to be, it's okay to say, I'm not having the best day, to be honest. It's hard. And it's funny, we use words like in the office when, hey, how are you doing today? I'm great. And then when somebody says I'm okay, it means the exact opposite. You're not okay.
Right.
It's like, I'm okay. And it's like, no, you're not. That's why you didn't say great. And you think okay is the safe word to say, and it's really not, so I think it's good that we can, be honest, because that belonging, as she says, real belonging is found in sharing your life, not what you can do for people.
That's right. I think that's one of the things that I love the most about what she shared is, for the last 5 years, I've been meeting with a group of women, and we've gone through a process called Listen to My Life. That's what it's called. And you walk through stages of your life, and we listen, 5 of us. We each have listened through various seasons of each other's lives. And it has been remarkable. The word compassion in scripture in the New Testament breaks down to mean co-suffer.
Yes.
And I think when we listen to people's stories, we begin to have empathy and co-suffer with them. And it helps us care for people differently when we share in story. And so I just love that she talks about, finding beauty in brokenness and the value in sharing story. It's freeing, it's healing. And so we just want to encourage you as we end this podcast to ask God to show you who you can share your life with and who are people that you need to listen to their life. So I want to just encourage you this week to maximize your ministry moments, have coffee with someone this week and listen to someone's life and share your life with them and see what transpires in light of that. And we're praying for you. We hope you have an incredible week encountering the presence of Jesus. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.